And we're on. Good morning, Ms. Van Meter. How are you doing this morning?
Very good, Mr. B. How about yourself? How you feeling?
Doing okay. Doing okay. Feeling a little, feeling a little anxiety about trying to get everything finished up before the end of the year, which I'm
Yep.
sure that you are similarly feeling. And
I think everyone is. Students, parents, teachers, admin,
right.
my dogs. They're
Right.
like freaking out.
So my cat and my dog, I think that I was projecting things, right? It's funny how you don't realize that you're projecting anything until, there's little animals that start picking up on those cues. And I noticed that I was projecting anxiety and some frustration because my cat and my dog, they were fighting like cats and dogs. They were just,
Right?
and I'm like, this is odd. Why are they doing this? And then I realized, am I projecting that anxiety? And so then I had to take a step back and go, I think I am. And so when I was walking with my dog around the neighborhood, I was walking with such intensity and purpose driven and all of this. And I realized that was seeping out. And so I started to take the time to just be collected and be mindful of each moment and then stop fighting. So yeah, it's pretty interesting how social emotional health and wellness can affect those around us when we don't even realize that.
Right. Yeah, you can kind of reverberate between everyone in your house and it just piles up. So what are you doing then to like take care of you?
Well, that's a good question. I'm reading Lord of the Rings. I'm very mindful. I just need to unplug, and so that's a trilogy that I read in high school before the movies came out, and it's been awesome to kind of go back to that story. It's like interacting with an old friend that you haven't talked to in years, and so
Right.
that's been a good unplug. Some other ways that I'm doing that, I'm also trying to brush up on just other things for people around us, right? I'm rereading quite another of these books that talk about scaffolding English for English language learners, and just kind of picking up on different different resources out there that are going to help me. I've attended a few podcasts for digital strategies and social emotional wellness. So those are things that I know it's kind of connected, but those are things that I'm also trying to better in myself, right?
Right. So like learning, diving in, engaging, reading, those seem to be like your de-stressors, your self-care kind of things.
I think so, and a little bit of yard work too. But I keep getting hurt. I keep like tripping or
Dive bombed by moths?
getting dive bombed by moths.
Yeah.
Moth killing machine inside the house. The cat, he's a little moth assassin, and he's just incredible. So what are some of your de-stressor strategies?
My de-stressors? Well, one thing I realized very quickly going into distance learning is I had to turn off the sound on my phone because my email's hooked to my phone. So every email I would get, it would go ding, 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 like nonstop. And so over 100 emails a day. And so finally I got myself to a point where I'm like, it's okay, check your email 3 times a day, respond, and then I don't have to worry about it. Because if I would spend all day. The first few days that we were doing distance learning, I was spending all day hooked into my computer. My kids weren't getting their work done because I was focusing on responding to emails. So that was the first thing I did, was disconnect from my phone 24/7, because I needed to be able to assess the questions, but I didn't need to be doing it 24/7. So I kind of got to that point.
That's a leadership lesson in there. We get to the point where we kind of feel like we've got the answers, or it has to be dependent upon us to do all the questions and all the answers. When if we create different support structures within maybe our classroom or within leadership, that we can have like little support groups. That's one of the things I did in my class. I got them in a project, but I got them in groups of about 4 or 5. And that's their first line. That's their first line of defense. But then
Right.
they see there are other projects. And so where your solutions don't just have to necessarily be driven internally by your group. You can look externally and see what another group is doing. It's those little tricks, but if we're not doing that, then we're the only person answering it, and we can get this, we're a superhero type of mentality when even though teachers we're heroes, right? We're heroes to a lot of people. One of the dangers is that we can get burned out, right? So what else have you done to try to stop or halt these feelings of being burnt out?
Well, I did reassess after a few days of questions and ask myself, okay, well, what am I not answering at the get-go that everyone needs to know? And so I took a page from Miss Stokes. Yeah. She put mandatory on everything that's mandatory, like right there in the title. And I was like, love it, taking it, using it. And so I did. So now all of the fourth quarter stuff, it just says mandatory right at the beginning. And so that way, when it pops up in the parent email too, they're like, hey, I know you have to do this because it says mandatory.
That's brilliant. It really is, because it's a small little solution, but it changes the dynamics of everything else that follows. And I stole from her as well. I put for all the third quarter bits, I put optional and big head.
Yeah, I did that too. Yeah.
So kudos to Miss Stokes, who is influenced. Extends far beyond her own classroom, right?
It does. I love actually watching all of our colleagues and what they do, and I'm like, hey, that's a great idea. I want to do that too. And I try to apply it to my group. I did the same thing with something Miss Salstein does. She has a mandatory class that everyone attends. Obviously, I don't hold it against students if they can't show up. Usually they email me if they can't, and that makes sense. But she does the first 15 minutes of class is class time. What that does is it allows for that instruction. Mm-hmm. And kind of a little bit of engagement. But then the last 15 minutes is question and answer. Right. And I love that, because then it's like, I know that they're going to show up. Mm-hmm. I know it's going to give them a chance to ask those questions that they may not realize that they have. Yeah. And that's cut down a lot too on miscommunications and everything else. So kudos to both of them. I really like what they were doing, and I implemented it, and it certainly helps a lot.
I mean, it really does paint the importance of working within teams and having a very collaborative focus moving forward. If you have common expectations, and while we don't have a huge influx of English language learners at our school, having these common expectations can help. So for the other educators that might be tuning in from other schools, and I know that we're getting more and more people following this channel, that those are some good strategies. But I know that you have a team yourself. You're leading a team of students. And so a good segue into the Natural Helpers. Tell us about what the Natural Helpers are for those that may not be aware of what this group does.
The Natural Helpers are a peer support group. They are really the team that's on the ground, working with everyone else in the school, checking in on them, and just being there as a person that's a safe person to go to, no matter what the issue is, whether it's big or small. And they've done a really good job this year. I know there was a lot of training involved. They are trained in a number of different crisis management processes. Recently, we were actually planning this really awesome end of school fiesta for the middle school, and then the high schoolers were planning this really awesome health fair and engagement. And then of course, COVID. So what they have actually done is gone online. We have an email now. Hold on. Let me show you.
All right.
Natural Helpers at cottonwoodclassical.org. Don't mind the G there.
Okay.
And then they also started an Instagram. And it's just CCPS Natural Helpers.
There we go.
Yep.
You need to send that link to me
so
I can get it linked to our main CCPS Instagram page.
Oh, did you link it?
I don't know if I have or not. So just
give
me the link so I can remember to do that. So we have a platform that we can jump off into a bunch of other platforms,
Yeah. And so the general idea is if somebody emails them, they'll get back to them within 24 hours. It's 100% confidential. Nothing will be shared unless there's a concern for like danger to self or others. Okay. And so that is one thing where they do have to report if they are concerned that there's like a imminent threat to yourself or somebody nearby. And then the Instagram allows them to also receive direct messages. So if you don't feel comfortable emailing, you can always direct message on Instagram, or you can just follow them and read the posts that they put up there. A lot of positive stuff, a lot of checking in things, that kind of stuff.
Very cool. Very cool. So what strategies have, how are things different from quarters 1 to halfway through 3, and then quarters 3.5 all the way up until 4?
It's very interesting. What I've heard from others is that actually some of the staying at home has been really good for people's mental health, or it's been a tax on others. So some people have, pretty stable home lives, and then not having all of the input from everyone else going to school and expectations at school and peers and teachers and everything else, and then going home and having expectations at home, that can create a lot of stress for some people. So being at home and only having that one level of expectation is very helpful. But then there are other people who have really uncomfortable home lives. The dynamics just don't work. And that's normal, but it's not pleasant. You can probably hear my dogs. And that's when you really want to be there for those individuals, because they need an outlet. They can't go to school and get an outlet. Sometimes it's sibling stuff. Sometimes it's parents that don't get you. There's a number of different things that it could be. And so that's really hard. And it sucks, frankly. Like, a lot of people are tired of being stuck in homes without seeing friends and not having an outlet. And so that's where natural helpers are there to, if your friends are tired of hearing something, or you don't feel comfortable telling your friends, and you certainly can't tell your family, they kind of come into play there. And so we've seen like a shift, like some people that were having issues earlier no longer have issues. And then some people who were just fine now do have some issues.
I think that's one of the fallacies of thinking that that what your own experiences in your own bubble are the same experiences of other people, and it's not intentional. We don't set out to say, hey, my worldview is better than your worldview. We just know what we know, right? We perceive only what we can see in front of us. And I know as an educator, that's one of the things that I've picked up while I'm only teaching a single class this year. I notice the ones that are attending, and I also notice the ones that aren't. And those are, those are just a small little snapshot. And we connect, we call and go, what's going on? Why haven't you shown up? But some of those things, if you take that and expand it across the city, we also know that Albuquerque, New Mexico has one of the highest, tied with the highest of Arizona for adverse childhood experiences in the state. And so,
yeah, I was actually talking to someone who works in trauma relations with CYFD, and they said that it's gone up a lot during the COVID epidemic. The reporting is lower. It's probably because there's not many people catching it, but the issues and the severity actually have increased.
Taking just a moment, and it's kind of a sobering thought for any students out there that might be watching that are feeling like they're things are spiraling out. Things are spiraling, and they don't know what to do. It might be trauma. It might not be trauma. It might be just emotional turmoil. What would you tell them right now?
First thing I would do is say the crisis text line, if you have access to a phone, the crisis text line is the best way to go. You type hello in the box to the number 741-741. That gives them somebody who can just field conversation for them and help them work out what's going on in their head. So if somebody is at that point where they're like overwhelmed and they're feeling an immediate need to communicate, that's the best way to go. Our natural helpers are there for people who need to talk to someone. It's not necessarily urgent, because like I said, it may be 24 hours before they get back to them. But, excuse me, they're there too because they also know the dynamics in school and everything else. So it's sometimes nice to have someone who understands where you're coming from and actually can have some frame of reference of what's going on with you. And then also when you go back to school, you know that at least a group of people get you a little more. So even if you're not talking to them every day, at least they understand you a little bit more.
Very cool. Wish we could have that number, maybe put on hoodies or anything like that.
It'd be awesome if we had a hoodie that had, which is horrible because we're not there anymore to wear the hoodies. I'm wearing a hoodie.
Yeah, that's right. So we'll make sure that we project the number somewhere, maybe as a link on the video as well for
That'd be great.
They're watching.
So my daughter and I actually created, we call them stress squishies. They're just like little rice balls.
Okay.
So you like stress them. And I think they're gonna post the link, and I think I send it to you.
Okay.
If you want to watch my daughter make stress squishies.
Sure.
So you can make them too at home. I'm sure everybody's stocked up on rice, so you should have plenty of rice to make these.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
If not, I've seen it back in the grocery store, so I think it's back on stock.
Pulling weeds is that.
Yes.
Except I just keep getting hurt pulling weeds, so maybe rice squishy is what I should do. Let's say we have students out there that aren't feeling that. They're feeling, man, I wish I could be a help. I would like to be a resource to the community. Moving into next year, what's the process for becoming a natural helper?
Excellent. We have a survey that usually goes out at the end of the year through advisors. I think we're hoping to be able to get it emailed to everyone this year.
Okay.
And you select people. So you don't nominate yourself, you are selected by your peers. And what that is you get a survey that says, hey, who do you feel comfortable talking to? Who would you go to with an issue? Who is nice to everyone, no matter what? And those are the people that you want as your natural helpers, because you don't want them to judge you when you get there. You don't want the person that's always making fun of you to be the person that you're supposed to go to if you're having a hard time.
Yeah.
So peers actually nominate these individuals, and then teachers will also nominate individuals. And then we ask them if they're interested in becoming a natural helper. And we ask them that because they're held to a higher standard, characteristically. And then they also have to go through a number of mandatory trainings. So it's also time intensive. And so it's kind of like a job in some ways, and they have to take it seriously like a job. And I will say that I work primarily with middle school. Dr. Reed Smith works with high school, but everyone that I've had the chance to work with has really risen to the occasion. And that doesn't mean that you don't run into normal issues and drama and stuff yourself. It just means that you may push yourself a little bit harder to learn from it a little faster.
Right. Well, I mean, that's really good to know. So the students out there that aren't nominated that still would like to help out and maybe grow in that capacity, what advice might you give them to? We're talking about social emotional awareness, but it's also about social emotional help that you project to other people. What practices would you help encourage them to start practicing in order to grow in that?
Well, everything that you do affects at least one person. So whether you bring them up or you bring them down, so start by just being that person that you want to be able to go to. That right there will change more people's lives than you probably ever will realize. If you really want it more organizational, then email us. I know Miss Nancy has a number of things that she's done with students on social emotional awareness and how to be those people. And she was working with a group before we left. Mm-hmm. And so I think you can be a natural helper. Like, people are naturally helpers. Some people aren't, but most people are in some capacity. And I think just being that person will make a difference, whether you're in part of an organization of it or not. And if you want to be in more of an organization, then feel free to email Dr. Reed Smith or myself.
Very cool. Yeah, I know in my role, things have changed, right? The dynamic of how students have interacted with each other has undergone a digital cultural shift within the last 4 or 5 years. This is becoming more prevalent, the main mode of communication. And so I've seen less mean words that are spoken and more mean words that are typed. And so, but I think that there's also that capacity to flip that script as well, instead of typing something mean. And I think that we hide behind
Yes.
right? Where we could actually just go out and start to replace that by typing positive comments, because that's how others are interacting with us more so today than in past years.
It's very interesting. I watched the 100 Humans on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen that.
I haven't.
No, it's really neat. And of course, as someone who teaches science, I'm sitting there picking apart their research as they're going through it. But one of the things they did is they had people write critiques on somebody, like a performance piece. They had to watch a video and then they had to write a critique, essentially like making a comment on a YouTube video. One group was told that they were going to have to say what they write to the person directly, and one group was told that they would be anonymous. Well, the group that was anonymous definitely was much harsher. And of course, when they brought the person in right afterwards, they were like, I didn't think we'd have to say this out loud. And then they had to read what they wrote, and it just like crumbled them. You watch people crumble, just how mean they can actually be, and the realization of how mean that you can be without even realizing it. And so it was an interesting lesson. And when they had to reflect on it, they're like, man, I wouldn't have said that normally. And I don't know why I went that far. And it happens on us too. Like it happens with everyone.
Yeah, I can't see you if I'm right here, but I can see you when we're being connected, right? And I think that, we just don't see. We can't judge the reaction of a person, or if our words are slinging. We don't know how it's affecting somebody else. It's always that reminder to be kind. I know you have to jump off into a class here.
I do. Yep.
But what are you chosen for your caffeinated beverage of choice?
Oh, I drink coffee, lots of it. So any excuse to drink more coffee, I'm there.
Okay.
It doesn't really matter what kind of coffee it is, because I add so much creamer that it's really kind of like watery, slightly coffee tasting milk. It's so,
Right.
But it's good.
Okay. I remember it back in university. They used to have this. It's like squeezable coffee syrup that you could put. So that's what my coffee was, and it was not coffee. And then they stopped making it, and I'm like, I can't enjoy that anymore. But for today, I've already had my coffee, and if I have too much, you got to peel me off the walls. I just get random.
You're like up there with your cat.
Exactly. And my cat is up on the wall sometimes. I'm drinking Dancing Willow Herbs Organic. It's a invigorate, focus, and awaken loose leaf tea. So I'm not drinking
Excellent.
This morning, but tea.
Awesome. I do tea time. Yep. So, but that's at like 2.
I really appreciate you coming on here. I really appreciate all the things that you're doing with your natural helpers. So those of you that are joining in, remember the 2 ways that you can connect with the natural helpers. The first is their Instagram page, correct? No?
Yep.
Natural helpers. And then show them the email one more time so that they can all see. There we go. And then the last thing, if you're in crisis, what is the crisis number?
Text hello to 741-741.
Hello, 741-741.
Absolutely.
Ms. Joy Van Meter, thank you so much for being on the show, and I hope that you have a lovely rest of your day.
You too, Mr. B.
Take care. Bye-bye.